On behalf of the captain and the crew, we'd like to welcome you on board Flight 070, now departing to the holiday flying stress of 2022. Cabin crew, arm doors, and cross-check.
Thank you for listening to us today. If this is the first time listening to this podcast, welcome aboard. If you're a returning listener, we're glad you're back. Seat 1A provides tips and tricks from more than 5 million miles worth of flying to help you take off from the crowd.
In today's experience recorded on the 9th of January 2023, we're going to take a look at the stress of what happened during the holiday flying season that ended 2022.
And then we'll wrap up with some other current news about the world of aviation.
Well,
yeah, man.
2022 ended with a bang.
Exactly. We had stress in the summer. We have stress in the winter. I mean, thank goodness I wasn't flying Southwest or Sunwing this holiday season.
Yeah, it's funny. We usually save our news to the end, but, for our listeners, we always peruse the news and find something interesting to talk about at the end. And in our little internet searching, we've come across all the sites. Southwest. Man, they had a bad run, this one.
Yeah, and, congratulations. Now you're getting technology updates to meet the 21st century.
Yeah, maybe the flight deck of the 737 will finally progress and change to match the rest. Oh, good grief.
Yeah.
So, no, it's been... wow, there's a lot went down. And so in our experience today, we're actually both going to talk about our experiences. We both were in travel modes, going on destination journeys in the last couple of weeks here. None of them were terribly straightforward. Well, they were. I mean, we got to where we were meant to go, which, hands down means we succeeded.
Yes.
But it wasn't with a bit of anguish and heartache along the way.
Exactly.
Oh my goodness.
And as every other traveler, or tons of other travelers in North America, over the Christmas holiday period, I mean, we had weather everywhere, serious weather incidents, except for maybe a few spots, and then just volumes and technologies and crewing and all the other stuff that happened early in the year, baggage.
Yeah,
that we talked about in episode 68.
It's funny.
68,
we all hit, summer 2022. Thinking, all right, we're coming out of the pandemic. It's time to travel, and then quickly people realize that the effects of what happened in the world of employment, etc., during the pandemic is taking its toll in the summer. And then, come fall, at least in the North American, mainly European continent, travel kind of eases off, and it kind of felt during this rush that people thought, okay, travel is back to pre-pandemic, and kind of forgot about the woes of the pandemic in the employment world that were really just a couple months ago and that have not yet been solved.
And it's like they forgot everything as well about, weather and blizzards and crazy nasty stuff happens in the winter too. So you better be ready for it. Yeah.
So first up was myself and my family. So my wife, myself, and my 19-month-old. So that puts a time frame. Now, we booked this trip months ago. It was to go visit family in San Diego, California. The run out of Vancouver to San Diego, there's only 2 carriers that do it, double daily on one and single, actually not even daily. I think they've dropped down to 3 times a week on a different carrier. So what we had done previously, pre-pandemic and all the years past, is you fly to LAX, which is a very competitive run, rent a car, drive down to San Diego. Very simple. So in this trip that we did, for all that it was worth, rent the car, the gas, the time to go, deal with the car, it still was going to save us well over $300. So it was still worth it. And we're used to doing that run. And also flights in and out of LAX are a lot more frequent, which we're going to soon discover was a bit of a blessing. Yeah. So in the week, so this was we were scheduled to depart on December 20th out of YVR Vancouver, and in the week prior there was quite a heck of a snowstorm. Now, yes, we are Canadian based, and every single other city, major airport city in Canada, is well equipped for winter operations, runway clearing, roadways,
De-ice.
de-ice operations. Everything is set up except Vancouver. And we've heard this, other cities. London is another classic one because you don't get the snow that often. So the assets, the infrastructure is,
Is it worth to pay for to have it sitting in a hangar for the one
yeah,
day in the year that you might need it?
yeah. Or you just kind of like grin and bear it and try and get through the muck literally on the day of and hope for the best. So, YVR been hit with a pretty good dump of blizzarding snow in the week prior. It all melted away. And then on the night of, or the night, whatever it was, of December 19th, it really started dumping down again. And this was like nice, big, fluffy, heavy, proper white snow. So,
Fresh out of a Christmas movie.
totally, it literally was. It was crazy. It was beautiful. It was beautiful outside. And the roadways in the city of Vancouver were just abysmal. There's not enough snow removal equipment in the city and again in the budget to keep up with it. But like we just said, do they need to? We have other priorities. So I knew all this. So in the days out, I'm checking the flight. What's happening on time. And obviously the night before or the day before having checked in, the first thing I wanted to check, which is a pro tip that we hope that people will follow with, is where is this plane coming from? So it was Vancouver to Los Angeles. There's 4 or 5 flights typically in a day. Actually, they had canceled. So backing up a bit, sorry. We had bought a flight, this flight in early September. We were supposed to go on, I think, a 2 p.m. departure. And then, I don't know, sometime in October, we got canceled and rebooked on the earlier one, which was 11:05 a.m. No consequence for us. We're like, great, we're just going to get in earlier and everything's just going to be earlier. We have to get up a few hours earlier. No big deal. It actually worked better for our toddlers' sleep schedule anyway. So, yeah, checking the flight, looking for the inbound. So this is an Air Canada flight on a 737 MAX going out of Vancouver. Again, straightforward. And the night before, it showed the plane was coming in from Edmonton. So I checked the weather in Edmonton, and it was just simply clear and cold. I'm like, okay, I have confidence. It's Edmonton's a fantastic cold weather airport. Having lived and worked there, I know that plane is coming out. And the plane was starting its journey there. So, it had ample time to kind of catch up and get ready.
Now, just for checking, which sites do you use? I use Flight Radar 24.
Yeah, I use Flight Radar 24, and as well, the Air Canada app is very good in that sense, in terms of these technical details. It'll show you the inbound flight and the status of it and everything. And you can perpetually go backwards in time. I'm not sure how far. Like, I could look and see the plane was coming in from Edmonton. I could then click on that flight and hit incoming and see where it came from. So you can backtrack it and log it and see what's going on with this fin number and tail number. Again, I don't know if this is a couple days or if you could just keep on tapping on the app. Yeah, so that's one thing to check on your flight apps. Or I mean, of course, Flight Radar 24 is an amazing spot to check it, but if you don't have that, and it's kind of hidden a little bit, so you have to go into the flight status, and then you'll see standbys, upgrades, and then it'll say incoming flight. So checked it, said Edmonton, okay, fine. Now the weather was really coming down, so we went to bed at, you stay up late. So to be at the airport for 11:05, I'm like, I know it's going to be holiday season. I got the young one. We're going to do the full 3 hours.
Got bad traffic.
Yeah. So I'm like, okay. So, got picked up at 7:30 a.m. So this is, you're getting up at like that 5 a.m. kind of thing to kind of get the whole shebang started. I mean, I had to do 2 rounds of shoveling prior to leaving the house just so we could get out. The roads were just insane. Luckily, it was our brother-in-law that drove us, and he had like a actual 4x4 SUV who was able to plow through and show up, which was great. Now, when we woke up, first thing I did was like, oh. So I checked the status, and now it showed our plane as being the one coming in from Ottawa. Like, oh, okay. Well, that's interesting. And then we just turn on the news, and it's like all flights, it was just very broadband. All flights at YVR canceled, airport closed. I'm like, okay. So immediately get on the YVR site. And what they did is they halted all arrivals. I think anything past midnight that night, there were no arrivals allowed.
Okay.
And this was a combination. I mean, the way they said it on their website was actually quite good. I mean, whoever handles their PR is very good at putting this out there, saying it's a combination of keeping up with the snow falling, but also that flights, they had nowhere to put planes. Because, they have to back planes that are maybe remaining overnight. They have to back off of the jet bridges and park on positions. They couldn't keep those positions. They couldn't even clear those positions fast enough. So there was creating this backlog. So they just basically did a complete ground stop and closed arrivals, except for essential, everything in the air, of course.
Yeah.
Coming across the ocean. We'll get to that in a sec. So that was interesting, but it looked like stuff was taking off. I'm like, well, okay. And our flight still showed green on time. Now, there's an 8 a.m. flight that goes out of Vancouver to LAX. It canceled. I was like, aha. So I'm like, well, we're not going to know until we try. And right up to the minute of us locking the house and leaving, I was checking. On time. Other sporadic flights were still going. A lot of the usual suspects were canceling, like smaller places, regional stuff, but other stuff was going. So we barrel on over to YVR and through the snow, and there's people there, and we walk into that terminal, which is the US departures. Man, it was mayhem. Whoa. With all my, our av geeking and our experience, I walked in and my heart just stopped for a second. I'm like, oh no, this is going to be one of those days. There was people lined up like upside down and backwards, people lying all over the place, bodies everywhere, sleeping on whatever they could find. It was just like something out of the, TV.
Yeah.
So, having a toddler, I was able to use the theoretical family check-in line. Now, I miss the old days where you just have a check-in line and then you have a check-in line for status or family or whatever. Now it's like all this thing is split up like, okay, well, go here to the machine, print your thing, tag your bag, do a bag drop. But if the machine doesn't like you, it spits you over to the quote unquote assistance line, which is everyone else and their problems. It's just like calamity.
And the machine didn't like you?
It did not. So here's a bit of a learning thing, which I didn't know. So when you're traveling with an infant, because obviously our son is under 2, he's lap held, so he doesn't hold his own seat. So the official code for infant is INF, India November Fox. So that joins the name. Well, when you scan the passport, so it scanned mine, no problem. Then it would scan my wife, no problem. Well, when I went to scan my son, his name doesn't have an INF attached, and it's lobbed off some of the letters on the record locator, which is not what's on the passport. So it spits it out saying, no, cannot scan, mismatch. Okay. So all you're left to do is go to
the line and check in with the person who can understand how this happens.
Now, if he was an adult or someone else, we would have had to have joined a very, very, very long line of people that was not moving fast at all. Because this long line of people was everybody with the canceled and delays. And fortunately, I'm pulling that car. I'm like, okay, family. So there we are in this family line. But what ended up happening is that family line was also becoming a bit of a secondary throw line for all
Yeah.
these check-in assistants. So there were non-families in there, which was a bit irritating. There's a big sign there, check-in for families with children under 6 years of age. And there's like a single, solo traveler, a couple. I'm like, well, okay. And then what they ended up starting to do is anyone that needed wheelchair assistance, they start chucking into the same line. So here I am overanalyzing everything, having, worked in the industry. I'm thinking, okay, what else can I do? I found an agent who wasn't very helpful, and they basically just gave me the cold, like, yeah, you got to go to the desk. End of discussion. Okay. And at this point, you could just see things going bizarre and wild. There was a flight to Phoenix that was leaving, and within less than an hour, there were people out there trying to check in. Well, they've missed the cutoff.
Yeah.
The baggage cutoff. They missed it all. So obviously the machine is saying, no, cannot. They're trying to find some agent saying check-in assistant. And there was actually a bit of it was starting to get messy. And what they didn't realize is, the baggage, these cutoffs have relevance. And not only that, I mean, you still have to go through
clearance. I was going to say, like, how was pre-clearance in Vancouver?
Exactly. There's pre-board, the security screening, and then there's pre-board clearance. Like there's a lot more that you have to do.
Like U.S. Customs immigration.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I don't know, someone must have leaked to one of these irate passengers. This is a group of like 5, then 8, and then 10 people. It was like a bit of a pack growing, these Phoenix disruptions.
Mm-hmm.
We were fine. Like for timing, we were still very good. Someone must have leaked in that the plane is actually still going. So then, group mentality, these passengers are thinking, well, how dare you're sending the plane empty without us down to Phoenix. And in my mind, I want to just scream at them like, you have no clue what else is at stake here. Yeah, okay, they could hold the plane, but there's everything else riding on this flight.
That plane being on time, or as close to on time as it can be.
Yeah, that plane needs to go to Phoenix. There's people there waiting for it. It has to come back and probably do a whole lot more for many more rotations. And they're just not going to hold in this situation. That plane's got to go. There's a slot. It's got to go. And also, why are you out here with less than an hour to go? I get that it snowed last night and it was heavy, but maybe you should have thought about that the night before versus just think, oh, I'll just take the usual amount of time I need to get to the airport. Not to say that not everybody was, a lot of people were diligent and got there. So it was getting really frustrated. So when we finally got to the counter, there was this other woman and her 2 children. She was literally pretty much screaming at the agent. So she left the agent that I was about to wheel up to, went to another agent, tried to tear a strip off of him. Sorry. The agent I was about to deal with was with someone else. This irate woman was tearing a strip off some other agent. When my agent freed up for the seconds that it took for me to wheel ahead, this woman came swooping in and started like ripping her head off and pretty much shoved me in the process, like physically shoved me out of the way. So I had to get like assertive and not, I'm not going to get physical and start like causing a scene, but asserting my right, saying, I don't care about your problem right now. I'm here. This poor agent is going to help me because we're here and she can do it. It was just bizarre. I kind of, it was like, there's this Air Canada agent there and she's doing her best. I didn't hold her hand, but I kind of like put my hand next to hers saying, thank you for everything you're doing. I understand what's going on. You're doing a great job. I hope your day isn't too crazy. And she appreciated that. So she helped me. And with all this madness going on, like she did her job and she did an amazing job, like keeping her calm, doing the computer thing, tagging our bags with, there were probably 20, 25 people around us all swarming around these gates these counters. Cause these are kind of like it's not the counters where you have the belt. It's like the stand-ups and you walk through and you pass through with your cart and move on.
Oh, right. Okay.
So we did our thing. We walked away from the madness. We dropped our bags. And now what's next is security. So more on this. A lot of options. We have a toddler, so that qualifies us for a family line. We have the Nexus, which is the frequent traveler card program for the continent. And what else do we have? Uh, at YVR, I think one of the major Canadian banks, CIBC, their Visa card. I know there's a bit of an agreement that if you have that, I think actually Toronto has this too. If you have,
Toronto uses, I think it's Amex in Toronto that they've got the
yeah,
agreement with.
if
It
you have a
was
particular credit
CIBC,
card.
I think, at one time. So for Visa,
Hmm.
but yeah, it's the Amex one right now.
So if you have a particular credit card that qualifies you also into the Nexus line.
Yeah,
And the other thing that I did, which something new that YVR is doing, is you can pre-book a slot.
I saw that.
Yeah, which I thought was interesting. So I pre-booked it. I was like, well, I don't know, maybe I need to use it. So I basically went in armed to the teeth with like, I have the right to get to the shortest line
Yeah,
possible. Well, the minute they see you with a stroller, you're automatically in the family line, which actually is its own short line, and it's designed for families, which is quite a good thing that YVR does. Like the aisles are bigger, and the agents that are the security agents that are working the checkpoint know. Okay, they tell you, instruct you with the stroller what to do. You know, if you have like milk, and because when you're traveling with a infant or toddler, you are exempt for liquids and things as long as they do a quick test and check, baby food, all that kind of good stuff. So it took a little while. It probably took a good 15 minutes at least just to muddle through that. But it wasn't frenetic. I mean, there was a family in front of us that had a kid with a double stroller. There was another one behind. So we were all chatting, and the kids were having entertaining themselves, and it was fine. US Customs and Border Protection was dead.
really.
Yeah, it was like maybe three people in front of it. It was nothing. It was such a slow trickle. So it was fine. So anyway, we get through.
So all that insanity from the front didn't make it into the.
No. Well, no. So we get through to the airside gates and identify our gate, see what's going on. And I look outside. There is an aircraft there. Now, oh, I missed this little tidbit. When on our way to the airport, I'm like, okay, is it still this Ottawa flight? No, they changed it to the flight coming in from Kona, Hawaii. And
Okay.
the way the routing and the schedule works here in Canada is you have a lot of red eyes that come out of Hawaii and land in the morning in Canada, usually in Vancouver, and then they spin and do something else. So I was like, okay, well, that's good because the Kona flight would have left and it's inbound.
It's warm weather and should be leaving
Yeah.
on
When we
time.
got through security and customs, I checked again, and now it was the Maui flight. I was like, oh, they're not sure yet which plane is operating. But when I got to the gate, I saw a plane parked with the jet bridge attached, and I could see that the heater hose is attached. I'm like, okay, the plane is serviceable. It's good. Everything seems to be fine. Check with the agent. Well, I didn't check, but the crew showed up. So there's a full crew. No, there's 11:05 departure, and it's 10:15. I'm like, okay, this is about normal time. Things should start rolling here. By 10:30, crew's not on yet. I was like, uh-oh. Because usually you get the crew on within the hour. Coincidentally, where we were sitting, there was a Air Canada pilot flying. He must have been deadheading. So I'm literally sitting as close as I can because he's on the phone with crew scheduling,
Yeah.
asking if he can assist and operate. I'm like, why is he trying to operate? And the whole reason for this, as finally announced by the gate agent, was that the first officer for this flight was kind of stuck at the hotel. There was so much snow that the hotel cruise shuttle, I don't know, was slow or behind or stuck or something, and could not get him to the airport on time to join this crew. So they basically said he's trying to get his own taxi, Uber, something to get here and do his job. In the meantime, this deadheading pilot's probably trying to like help save the time here and be like, well, forget that guy. I'm here. I'm ready. I'm good to go. I'm in uniform. I
Yeah.
can do this. I don't know. In the end, the guy showed up, I think, without too much delay. And finally, the crew went on. Okay, fine. So after that, it was pretty straightforward, to be honest. Like it was at about 11:10 we started boarding. I mean, the flight was to leave at 11:05. At this point, I did not care. I was like, you know what? This plane's actually going.
Yeah.
This is amazing. You look at the flight board, and it was all like red, 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 cancel, cancel. So yeah, we boarded the I must write this down somewhere. The gate agent, I need to send a complaint. So, having been one of these gate agents, and there's no need sometimes to think you're going to do your job 10 times better than anyone else. This guy, I think, has worked in the industry too long. I'm standing there with a toddler strapped to me, pulling a stroller bag. My wife's got two bags, other carry-ons. So I give the all three passports with the boarding cards all open to the picture page. Da, 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 da. And this guy tries to read me the riot act, saying, "Just so you know, it's illegal for something like it's illegal for you to carry someone else's passport." I'm like, "What are you talking about?" She's like, "She needs to be carrying her own. It's a federal offense." I'm like, "Uh-huh. Thanks, buddy." I just grabbed them and I moved on. Like,
Yeah. Good
in the
grief.
middle of all this like
Yeah.
melee of like stress and stuff, this guy's just in there like prodding it. So yeah, I need to send something in about that guy. Anyway, we get on the plane, board, flights rammed to the every seat. I'm sure the jump seats, everything was in use. And we push back and we start taxiing out. I'm like, okay. Well, we actually have a right over the wing seat. The wing is just covered ice, snow, still snowing. And of course, one of the pilots comes on and says, "Yes, we have to go get de-iced." I'm like, "Yep, okay, I know how this all works." And for those of you that maybe haven't listened to that part of it, I have worked at YVR as a de-icer for the company that does that, which is the third party. So I know exactly where we're going, exactly how they're going to de-ice the plane.
And is there centralized de-icing in Vancouver, like sort of a drive-through?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's not at the gate or anything, like how they do in Calgary. So we taxi all the way around, and there are three aircraft in front of us. No, four in front of us in the line. And this is where my heart just sank. There are 8 de-icing pads at YVR. Only 3 were in use this day. 2 of them had aircraft parked in them, wide bodies.
Okay.
And I could see a field of trucks just parked doing nothing. So on one of the, complete snowmageddon day, there's only 3 de-icing points in use, which is abysmal, but it is what it is. And we'll talk about the labor thing in a little bit here. It took us from the point when we joined the queue to the point we were turning onto the runway to take off was pretty much 3 hours. It was a long time, and it was just slow. The plane moves ahead because the next one went in, and then I'm looking at these planes ahead. There was like another 37 Max. There was a cargo jet 767 freighter that had sat overnight, and the only thing clear was like the windshield wipers from the flight deck.
Oh wow.
The thing was covered. I've done a de-ice on a 767. It takes a long time because there's so much surface area. I mean, that's a 67. We were fortunate there was no real big wide body in front of us, like a 777 or anything.
A 380 or
yeah. And just to refresh on de-icing, you first have to apply type 1, which is the orange stuff, to clean the wing. And then you got to put the green slime, which is type 4, which is your anti-ice, to prevent anything currently falling from sticking. So it's a 2-coat process. So on a day like this, they have to spray the entire aircraft to clean it up, and then they have to spray the green stuff on the wings, on the wings, the vertical stabilizer, everything. So long time. Oh, there's also the hose operation. I forgot to mention. I don't think I even mentioned that way back when we talked about de-icing. So you pull up, and the de-ice truck pulls up. The operator has to get out and pull out a long hose. And everyone's wondering, what is this guy doing? Because there's so much ice that it develops underneath the wing as well. And on that leading in. So he has to stand, he or she, sorry, from the ground and spray to blast it all off, and the engine cowlings and everything.
No
They
wonder
have
it
to
was
do,
taking forever.
yeah. So they have to do all of that before then they can start with the proper from above, with the proper nozzles and the hoses
Mhm.
and everything. So this whole and all the whole time I have a, you know, 28-pound, 19-year-old boy on my
19
lap.
month old, hopefully 19 year
Sorry. Oh God, that didn't sound good. 19-month-old. So we're rotating between the iPad and the out the window and the storybook and the toy and the IFE and the food. It was a lot. One thing I'm surprised at though, no people were not losing their crap.
stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I thought for sure some wingnut's gonna be like trying to tear a strip off the crew. Nothing.
Wow.
They were good. I mean, the crew was going up and down with the water. They were allowing people to go to the bathroom. So shocking.
And nice that they were
Anyway,
having the IFE running while you were taxing out.
that may be part of it too. That could have been why people were just able to like sit there and get they got a whole movie in before even taking off. I mean, the flight to LA is like 2 and change, like 2 hours
Yeah.
15 or so. Like, we sat longer than the silly flight itself.
Good grief. You could have watched like all of Spartacus or some,
Yeah, some big thing, right? Or
epic long
something.
film or something.
Yeah, Thor. Yeah. But I kind of like basically bit my tongue as we were taxiing up, and I'm chatting with a friend of mine, another one of our listeners, my friend Jonathan Morgan in Winnipeg, is a big advocate, and he's mentioning like, oh, maybe you'll see the ANA and the Korean Air out on the tarmac, and I didn't quite know what he was talking about exactly until we started taxiing. So we're de-iced, we're taxiing out to the runway, and there's only a certain hold time, so it's a pretty quick run out to the runway. And then it all made sense. And, stuff I'd seen on the news, planes that had come in from their I guess, Pacific. Yeah, in this flight. So there was an ANA 777, there was a Korean Air Dreamliner, and there was a Cathay, probably a 350, somewhere around. They had flown across and had not been able to deplane yet.
Oh, wow.
I'm thinking, wow, that means these people have flown the 12 hours ish
Yeah.
and are now trapped on the plane. The crew is exhausted. They
Yeah.
have no more food and drink to hand out. The
Yeah.
bathrooms are probably just in an abysmal state.
Gee, yeah.
Oh, I just cannot imagine. And I'm wondering, like, why? Well, all the gates are either occupied or snowed in. All these
Yeah.
planes that are occupying the gates are meant to have gone somewhere. They canceled. There's nowhere to push these planes back to because there's too much snow and there's not enough snow removal activity going on.
And obviously, given the weather, air stairs are entirely out of the question.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, Vancouver only has a handful of buses because they don't really do that kind of operation. So my goodness, I was like, oh, those passengers, just unreal. And now, you go on videos on TikTok and all this, and there were not those flights, but there were some domestic flights where the planes had come in right around that time when YVR cut off operations and people were trapped just sitting there on planes through the night. Just, yeah, pretty hard state of affairs. Anyway.
Well, and I mean, it wasn't in YVR, but a cousin of mine works for one of the airlines that flies Fort McMurray, and they were stranded because of the amount of snow.
Where were they stranded?
In Fort McMurray, and showed a picture of the wing, and it was snow was almost a foot thick on the wing.
Whoa. And it takes, I mean, having done it, it takes a lot to blast off snow from, that amount of snow. So anyway, once we took off, it was business as normal, 2-hour flight, land at LAX, taxi straight to gate. And, the rest of our trip was pretty smooth, and we'll talk about LAX in a second. In going back and doing some research and talking to people, from what I understand, apparently YVR they outsource an extra snow removal provider. So apparently the airport did order in to prepare for all of this. It's the people. There were no people to drive because either A, there were just not enough labor, or B, the labor that did exist couldn't get to the airport.
Got snowed in themselves, yeah.
Yeah. And I know that's the case with the de-icing company, which I used to work for. They're running so thin that, there's just no way. Or maybe they could get in, but the shuttle from the employee parking lot wasn't running to
Yeah.
get them. So this whole calamity that just feeds into this perfect storm. So, and then we go into LAX, and there's I used to think I would like LAX, but this is one of those trips that just made me renew my not likingness of
The
it.
love-hate relationships on the hate dial.
Oh, it's just so oppressive. We went into Terminal 6, and the minute you step out of that jet bridge and into the terminal, it's just like the announcements are screaming and blaring and on top of each other, and tile everywhere.
Yeah.
Everyone's in your way, and we're trying to assemble a stroller and put it all back together. But we followed the signs. We took the elevators. We got our baggage. We did the air tag thing. It was fine. And then we had to like do the car rental shuttle thing. So, and of course, being an American airport, they charge you something like $10 for a stupid baggage cart. So you're trying your best to like manage without it. Point being is that, it was actually pretty quiet at the time when we arrived. It was already, I don't even know, what time was it now? 5, 6-ish.
Mm-hmm.
So I think we were at a low peak time. We get to the car rental, the shuttle, which is a big bus, like the curb and all the honking. We've talked about the curbside experience.
Mm-hmm.
And the bus driver actually allowed us to wheel in with the stroller with child inside, brakes on and hold, and we went. And we were pretty much had the shuttle to ourselves. There's only like one other family, and it was fine. We get to the other end, and the whole offload, very friendly, very nice. And we'll come back to that shuttle part. After that, got our car and off we went, and we were on our way. And that was the end of that whole madness. Looking back at that day, the number of flights that were canceled, amazing. I don't know how we managed to get out. We were one of, I don't know how many flights that got out that day, probably less than 50, maybe,
mm-hmm.
flights that made it out that day. We were very lucky. And I think it's because we probably had a critical flight. YVR Los Angeles run is critical connection feeder.
Yeah.
So when you're picking your flight, you kind of also have to look at the time of day, and is this a crucial flight?
Because that would be like timing wise as well, for like if leaving Los Angeles for goodness knows where in Southeast Asia, or exactly. Australia or New Zealand or that kind of thing, right? So
yeah, exactly.
Or other parts in the South Pacific.
Exactly. So sometimes the airlines have to make a decision. We have to do everything in our power to get at least one of these flights going. So
yeah. If you're liking this episode experience, you may also enjoy Experience 27. Planes, Trains, and Automobiles. Holiday Travel Horror Stories. It's available wherever you listen to your podcasts.
Yeah. So that was me. And then we started tracking you.
Yeah, because I was watching, I flew on the 24th, so on the Saturday, and essentially early in the week had started watching things, people I saw in other parts of like the Western US, like in Wyoming and stuff, where I'm seeing like record cold temperatures and blizzards. I'm like, oh boy, this is on its way across the continent. Is it going to be here right when I'm supposed to fly, or before, or what? And it was, there was deep cold Arctic air at the same time. I learned from my brother in Regina that it was so cold during the week that it was actually too cold for the de-icing.
That is serious cold then, because
it was below 30 below, so Celsius.
Wow. They couldn't even keep the truck hot enough.
Exactly. So of course I'm watching it, and then a couple days before I checked the weather, and it's like freezing rain warning. And I'm like, oh boy, freezing rain, then a blizzard.
Ooh.
And so I'm looking at things, freaking out, like the Thursday night, looking at things. And a friend of mine was doing some stuff at the airport in Toronto, and it was raining, and it was cold rain. And I thought, okay, well, whatever, and keep watching. The Friday morning, I was like, well, I have no idea if it's going to freeze up or what's going to happen. So went to the grocery store and bought provisions just in case I was going to get stuck over. And I joked with you, it's like, well, who knows? It might be Chinese food on Christmas.
Yeah, no kidding. Oh, man. So you're Your flight was on the
Saturday morning on the 24th at like 8 a.m.
Toronto to Calgary
Calgary.
on
Yeah.
Air Canada,
Air
or was it
Canada.
WestJet?
Air Canada,
Yeah. Okay.
which played key and important in this particular situation as well.
Okay.
So essentially watching weather. The snow started on the Friday, but it was not, so it started around like 10 in the morning and then didn't go as long and wasn't as heavy as it was in other places, like Buffalo, for example. And, 4 or 5 o'clock rolled around. It's like the snow looked like it had pretty much finished itself up. But at this exact time as well, the wind was picking up and the weather was getting colder. So it was, 60 to 80 kilometer hour winds and, minus 10, minus 15. So cold enough
Wow.
for just about anywhere.
Yeah.
And so I'm watching it and it's like, well, I go to bed and it's like, well, should I have called, say, like a taxi or car hire? I'm like, I have no idea what's going to happen overnight when I'm trying to sleep for like 3 or 4 hours. Then I wake up at 4:45. I didn't sleep much, but it's like
pretty much the same as us.
yeah. And then I look out and it's like, okay, whatever. And decided to book a lift. And well, I obviously surge pricing was in effect because it was the about 75% higher than I normally pay to get to the airport.
Oh.
I'm like, yeah, whatever. And like, here you go, buddy. Thanks for driving. And it was windy.
And you were checking the app. The flight was still showing.
The flight was showing on time. I got notification earlier in the week. They're like, yeah, you can change the flight if you want. No change fees, whatever.
Yeah, I actually received the same. Yeah.
Like and they're like, do you, and I'm checking the app, checking the check-in. I'm just like, okay, it's still saying on time. And, get to the airport, pretty busy in Terminal 1 in Toronto, was going straight through without check bags and proceeded to, because I have the Nexus line, I think there was only maybe 1 or 2 people in front of me in the line, which was great.
So you were doing checked bag or no check bag?
No check bag.
Oh, so you're going straight to gate?
Straight to gate, yeah.
What was the scene in the terminal like?
I mean, as crazy it was in the summer.
Because Toronto is like the big aisles airport, so you can only see prospectively.
So aisles. I mean, in the Canadian aisles, I mean, it was busy. I mean, I've flown through Toronto on Christmas before. It felt about the same.
Okay, but it wasn't obviously like because I was sleeping around on the floor.
Yeah, and I was still there early enough, being there at about 6:20. I was ahead of the wave that would have come a little bit later, and so I checked through. I had purchased the seat reservation with the credit card that allowed access to the Air Canada lounge. So I went in there. It was right full, but not super, super busy yet. And most people appeared to have been flying. There weren't a lot of cancellations on the board, but there were a few people at the desk shouting, I'm trying to fly to somewhere in the Caribbean and been waiting a couple of days or something. So I was fortunate.
I know that lounge. That lounge.
And part of the lounge was also under renovation. So, I mean, so there was less space available. And so I managed to just, sit there, relax, have a little bit of food and whatever to just get me through and not have to worry about that. And then proceeded down.
Yeah, you go down to the gates, right?
To the gates, yeah. I mean, it was the one end, not the end with like 3 or 4, but like there's the other end with like 1 or 2 that I'm like, okay, well, I'll fly out. And all things seemed pretty straightforward. Boarding was pretty straightforward. We were in a 321.
So you boarded on time and everything?
On time. And then, so we get everything all lined up. And then right as everybody's all in, passengers are in, pilots are in, pilot comes on and says, there's some issue with the baggage system at Pearson this morning. So he's like, all of you and all of us are on board, but most of your bags aren't. So what
was the cabin like at that point?
The cabin was like, okay, well, I mean, half dead and half asleep. But he's like, look, scheduling is processed in an extra 40 minutes wait time. So then proceeded with that and got everything. I tried to fall asleep since I hadn't slept much. And
so with that 40 minutes, they were able to get the bags in?
Apparently. I mean, I don't know who ended up there or not, but yeah, they were satisfied that they had the bags they were supposed to have, and then we left. Fortunately, I was on Air Canada, not on WestJet that day, because WestJet had decided to cancel preemptively all flights on the 24th after 9 a.m. out of Toronto because they were concerned about
The
the
weather.
conditions.
Wow.
So they had canceled everybody. So I'm glad I wasn't in Terminal 3 in Toronto that day.
Ooh. Interesting. So it's almost like they jumped the gun, but I wonder.
But on the one side, it's like, yeah, I can see why they did it. But then on the other side, it's like, all right, I mean,
They didn't even try.
yeah, it's like, but I understand, you don't want your planes to get stuck, especially because they're not based in Toronto and they'd all essentially be downline.
Yeah. But I mean, the weather outside at this point
I mean,
was
it was still windy. A friend of mine was flying from Toronto to Austin, and they had their flight delayed 45-ish minutes because the wind had blown so hard that it was banging the jet bridge against the plane, and they just wanted to make sure that the door wasn't
didn't
damaged.
damage it.
Yeah.
Okay, so these are all like
I mean,
normal
regular
things.
sort of like inclement weather kind of things, but I mean, it wasn't
Yeah.
too terrible, wasn't too bad.
Yeah.
Calgary was a flight was well, the pilot was pretty blunt with us. He said, "Look, just given the weather conditions, we're going to be bumpy until the far end of Lake Superior at Thunder Bay, Canada, and then after that, it should be pretty much smooth sailing," which it was, which gave an opportunity to sleep in a non-turbulent environment.
Good. Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that Maple Leaf Lounge. I know that lounge. They haven't really changed that setup much since its inception. And when these lounges get busy, it's almost not worth it sometimes.
Yeah, but in this day, it was like, yeah, there was still seats, and I was just like, yeah.
Good.
It was just an opportunity to. I just like, all right, it may be crazy in the lounge, but it's less crazy than it is outside.
Then it downs, yeah, exactly.
And because I was still as early as I was, when I was leaving, there was like big waves of people starting to come in. I'm like, okay, I'm at the right time.
Good.
As opposed to like when I was in Cape Town last summer, where it was like, yeah, could barely even find a seat.
yeah. It's funny, and we've talked about lounges before. It's like, yeah, hit or miss sometimes, depending on the situation.
Yeah, weather pretty. I mean, very cold for December in Canada.
Yeah,
learned that pickups are supposed to only happen in Calgary if you're picking up as a passenger at certain doors. Kind of blew by that rule and just went all the way to the far end, and my brother scooted in and picked me up, and we left.
Nice. Yeah. Good.
But yeah, pretty straightforward. And then
Merry Christmas happened.
Merry Christmas, etc., etc. And then
so
my flight back was on the 27th, on the Tuesday.
And it's the same thing in reverse. Calgary, Toronto,
same thing. Non-check bags. Thought I was okay all over for everything. No liquids, no nothing. But I had gotten a jar of creamed honey, so solid honey, for Christmas. So I proceed to go through the airport or through security there. And Calgary, I guess, just given time of the day, maybe staffing as well. Nexus line was closed, but there wasn't that many people in line anyway. And then they're like looking at my bags, and they're like, so we've got some issues with this. I'm like, well, it's this and this. And they're like, no, but there's still one thing. I'm like, oh, the honey. And they're like, yeah, you can't take this with you. I'm like, what? It's solid. They're like, no, but it's a food and it's more than 100 milliliters.
But it was dead solid. Like if you open the jar, you cannot pour it out.
You can't pour it out. Huh. But then, they called the supervisor, and the supervisor's like, oh, blah, blah, blah. And they gave me the food. I checked the food rules on the CATSA site. I'm like, yeah, you're correct.
Yeah.
But I'm just like, yeah. And they're like, well, do you want to check in the back? I'm just like, just keep it. Have a nice day.
Exactly. Merry Christmas.
Because I was like, if it hadn't been so insane with bags in Toronto, I probably would have checked it in if it had been a different time, even though I had some, tile, so Android equivalent of AirTag. But I was like, nah, for that, it's not worth it.
Yeah.
So it was also thick, heavy fog that day that I was leaving. So I left earlier to get to the airport than I normally would. And our flight was also delayed leaving Toronto and then coming back. So I knew that we were already an hour out.
Okay.
So then used the Maple Leaf Lounge in Calgary, chilled out and relaxed, and just checked things. Things seemed to be okay. Get to the plane, and we all board, and then find out from the flight deck that the first officer somehow got stuck in the foggy traffic and wasn't able to make his plane on time.
It's like we're living parallel lives here with our holiday travels. So same thing.
Yeah, so then we ended up
Incredible.
getting pushed back an extra 25-ish minutes or so,
Okay.
and then proceeded out on time. Flight was full and good, but it seemed that we were at a certain point in southern Saskatchewan literally surfing the weather front because it
Mm,
felt very much like we were off-roading in this or rally driving in this airplane, just like
wow.
not up and down turbulence, but a whole bunch of side to side,
Yeah.
and to the point where the pilot in charge told the flight attendants to take their seats.
Interesting. So, and then we may have talked about that in a previous experience, but if you ever hear the one of the pilots come on and say, "Flight attendants, be seated," you get ready for a good ride.
Yeah,
Because that's a universal. That means all stop, pull the carts in, get to the back, strap in, and sit down.
yeah,
Yeah, that means like moderate to severe turbulence upcoming.
exactly. And I mean, it was a good 20-ish minutes of back and forth and sliding around. Eventually, the food and water truck did go down with only about an hour left in the flight. So I mean, that's the latest ever that I've seen
Yeah,
them start.
yeah,
And arrived. I'm just trying to think. We had just a bit of a hold on the tarmac, waiting for a gate to clear, but all in all, not that bad. Also, because we were late, they specifically said, okay, if you're not connecting, can you please stay seated and let the people who are connecting get out first?
Oh, that's good.
Yeah,
That's very good.
because it
I
was
mean,
one of those timing ones arriving in Toronto around 10 o'clock. I mean, a bunch of, say, South
oh
American
yeah,
or other European connections that it was going to be making. So I can totally see why they were doing it.
yeah. That's good on the crew for sort of getting that
Yeah.
to happen. So
And then, yeah,
nice.
just back home without much issue at all. And as I was walking through the terminal, I was so late getting out that the flight deck had actually left before I got out of the plane. But I saw
Right.
them in the terminal, and I just said, that was a damn nice piece of flying you did there. So
Oh, nice, nice. Good on you.
yeah,
Oh wow, that's quite the rocketing ride back.
yeah, I've never had turbulence really. I don't think feeling that way before. It's always
Yeah.
been choppy turbulence for me. So
There's this bit of a grueling TikTok video that's been circulating of a Hawaiian Airlines flight that hit really severe
I've
turbulence.
heard about this one. Yeah,
Yeah, it's not a nice one to watch because you see people with like blood and like they've been like
yeah.
injured, and there's like a flight attendant strapped in her jump seat with like blood pouring down her face. The
Yikes.
cabin is just in shambles. Like the ceiling panels have been like hit by people.
Oh
Like
wow.
it's a pretty rough video. I'm surprised it doesn't have like a sensor thing on it, but severe turbulence on that flight as it's making its way across. So
And there was a couple passengers that it was like it was getting calm, but the pilot hadn't turned off the seatbelt sign yet, and they needed to use the lav, and the flight attendants are like, "Yeah, get your
sit
butts
down.
back in your seats because we're not done yet."
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Wow. Okay. Oh, what a way.
And then you flew back on the
2 days later on the 29th.
yeah,
So same thing. Rent a car, drive to Los Angeles, fly to Vancouver. This portion of trip just seemed so much more stressful. I'm not sure why. So, the whole we spend the day with our family, rent the car, drive to Los Angeles. Again, we've done this plenty of times. We went to the In-N-Out Burger off the end of the runway at LAX and
on,
did some plane
is it on
spotting.
Century? I think, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Some beautiful wide bodies came in. It was great. My son was like looking at it, the noise, and there were a lot of heavy departures as well on the parallel runway. So it was good. But it all sort of started to kick off at the car rental. So you drive to the car rental spot, you follow the lanes, and we unpacked, we returned the car, we unpack. And like I mentioned, when we came in, we were allowed to take the stroller into the bus.
Yeah.
So the way I had kind of packed everything, I had stuff in the stroller, like underneath, that was meant to kind of join the stroller bag later and all this kind of stuff. So it was busy. I mean, there were a lot of people. So two shuttles show up, and these are like full buses. like transit style. And there were other families with strollers, and we're wheeling up, and the driver, this woman, comes out and starts like hollering in this sort of abrasive way, saying, "All babies have to come out of their strollers. You have to fold them up and put them inside." We're like, "Oh, okay." So I just said, "Oh, I didn't know that," because on our way in, and she cut me off. She's like, "Well, they didn't tell you, and that's not our, what was it, our procedure
Mm.
or some."
Merry Christmas to you too.
Yeah, I starts reading the riot act. So I was like, okay, and we need time to. I'm like, okay, that's fine, but I need to like reconfigure and repack something. Like we got to change it. I'm going to strap him to me in the carrier and all this kind of stuff. So I said, okay, we'll just take the next one. She starts to like tear a strip off of me, saying, "No, that doesn't matter. You can't take." I'm like, I'm not saying we're not going to follow this. I'm saying I need time. Our family needs time. So leave us alone and we will take another one. And she actually then went to, I don't know, some other worker and said, I think he's just basically saying, make sure that we fold up. I was like, what is this woman's problem?
Yeah.
Like, calm down. I didn't say I wasn't going to. I'm not forcing my, like, we'll do. We'll just need some time and we'll
Yeah.
take the next one. We're in no rush. Oh, terrible. Like, it just was so off-putting, the whole thing. Now, coincidentally, one of my coworkers from here in Vancouver, she had been in India and Dubai on a trip. She had flown in on the Emirates flight, and we had this grand master plan to meet at LAX, where we were supposed to pick her up, and we were going to go to the In and Out, have a coffee or meal, whatever. So I was also chatting with her in the lead up to us returning the car. We were never able to meet because so she came off the Emirates flight. She had to reclaim her bags, clear everything, march everything over to the WestJet terminal at Terminal 3, and redrop, recheck everything. So in the time calculation, I was like, I'm pretty sure we may not be able to meet you, but we'll try. And sure enough, they channeled her in a way that she was able to stay airside somehow.
Okay.
But then she's like, yeah, I don't want to go through security again. It took her 45 minutes. So I'm not quite sure, but it sounded like just that transfer for her was horrific as well.
Yeah.
It's just like feeding my like dislike for LAX. So the shuttle driver we had was a very nice man. He helped us, offload prior, contrary to his colleague driving the other bus. We get in Terminal 6. The Air Canada check-in is dead as a doorknob. I was like, okay. We go. The agent is very nice, very accommodating, great customer service. I was fighting. I had actually lost my voice. So, trying to get through it all. So we do everything, drop everything up to security. So we have TSA pre-check because we have Nexus. And again, we have the baby and everything. And again, now off-putting, the TSA agents were so rude and abrasive. Like, we were used to in all our previous flights, tell us what you want us to do and we'll do everything you want us to do. Do we fold the stroller? Do we wheel it through some airports? You wheel it, they scan it. Some you have to fold it. And they're like, put the stroller there. Oh, okay. And then I said, well, what about the liquids we have for baby? She's like, well, you better be taking them out. Like, what? Why are you coming on the offensive here? I'm asking you politely a question.
Yeah.
Another agent kind of swoops in and tries to help us, like, a bit more pleasant.
Yeah.
And she made me take the whole stroller apart and send it through the.
What?
Yeah, it was crazy. I was like, this is, we don't have the world's biggest stroller, but we brought our like main, we didn't have the travel one that we had when we went to London. We had like our daytime at home one.
Yeah.
I had to disassemble, like it was in 3 sections going through all the means.
Are they going to make people who are in wheelchairs take them apart too?
It's crazy. So now there's this other guy who also has a child. He's standing kind of off to the side of the walkthrough, the detector.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking, okay, I guess I'm supposed to stand behind him. So we're standing there, and then the agent on the side's like basically screaming at us, like, I don't know what the hell you guys are waiting for. I'm like, well, can we go through? He's like, do whatever you want. Oh, okay. Like, what is your beef, dude?
Yeah.
Oh, awful, awful,
Yeah.
awful.
But I can only imagine. I mean, God, I mean, they must have had a pile of
Oh,
angry
I'm sure.
passengers
I'm
yelling at them
sure they've
all
been
of
like,
Christmas, right? Yeah, especially with
yeah,
like if like Southwest isn't in that terminal in
no,
LAX, is it? Oh,
no.
okay, yeah,
We were Alaskan and Air Canada.
okay,
So we go through it. Now I have to like reassemble our stroller and all our stuff and this and that. And nobody's like assisting, helping. It was just so offensive. So after the shuttle thing and then now the security thing, finally we are like put back together and head to the gate. And again, it's back into like, the loud brash announcements all
hmm
overlaid and trying to find elevators. And the thing about these terminals, like the old build style, there's no like wide open space where sound kind of just muffles off. It's
yeah,
all like tight and seats are really like close together. So we're just there in the middle of it. And it's like people
and
everywhere.
you're
And
gonna take it, and you're gonna like it.
yeah, yeah. And, trying to entertain our boy. And eventually, they call for boarding. Everyone just like swarms in. We obviously we had a zone on our thing, but the way they run it is zone one, zone two, and then pre-board.
Mm.
Like we weren't our own zone. We weren't zone three is not pre-board. Pre-board is just pre-board. So anyway, the gate crew did everything fine. We boarded fine. And for this one, I actually paid for what's called a preferred seat, which is an extra legroom seat on Air Canada.
Bulkhead.
No, well, good point. I was like, do I want the bulkhead? But then we don't have the access to have our bags underneath.
Right, right.
Which when you have a child, you need access to your bags. Right. Plane was full. So I mean, at that point, we pushed back on time, flew on time. But I think the whole day's experience and stress just fueled into our child who was grumpy the whole flight. And yeah, it was just a tough one.
Yeah.
But flew back to Vancouver and it's funny, knowing Vancouver airport, we were taxiing and I'm thinking, why are we going here? We taxied to a domestic gate. And I'm thinking, I know this airport. I've worked in this airport. I don't remember being there's usually like a swing gate where the secret hallway that leads you up to this feeder hallway that you
hmm
take.
Yeah, for customs, right?
We probably went to a gate that was the farthest away from customs you could probably get in that airport. Like it was far.
Yeah.
So, we assembled Sterling, walking, just full tour, tired, exhausted, get down to the customs hall. Fortunately, YVR is great. They have a family line for customs processing. We get to the agent, with our documentation, and he's just like, "Oh, where were you?" We're like, "San Diego, LA flight." And all he said to us, it was great. He's like, "Wow, you guys look friggin' tired," to quote him exactly, or friggin' exhausted. Welcome home, and that was it. And he just
Yeah.
like let us go. We're like, "Yeah, thank you." Bags came, and then our car seat, which was meant to go to the oversized belt, actually came spat out on the regular belt. So there I was like bouncing back and forth.
Back and forth. Yeah.
Yeah. And then the last thing I'll mention was there was this little incident. So the way the Canadian system work is, you go through your customs, your immigration, you get your bags, and then there's like one exit point, and that's where you determine if you're going to go into secondary inspection or if you're cleared to go to the public. And they collect your customs declaration card,
hmm
and there's usually one agent there like handling that whole thing. Everyone, crew, passengers, everyone goes to that one point, as you know. Well, we're there, and it looked like an American Airlines crew thought they were privy to that and above that, and could just like start opening gates on their own, like
Oh boy.
pieces of barrier that were set up. I just laughed at the rain of shame that the Canadian CBSA agents put down on them, saying, "Stop right there. You are not above this. Get back into the." Oh, I was like, that is priceless. Good on you. Yeah, crew. We all have to go through the same line. Welcome.
Yeah.
It was great. And they were just like tail between their legs.
Yeah. There's no crew line here.
Yeah. And that was it. And then we arrived home. no
which
weather
is a
and
little
things.
surprising. But anyway,
Yeah, and that was the end of our trip. So
cool.
quite the adventure we've had.
Indeed.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. So wow, that we were fortunate. I mean, we managed to get in and out on time or relatively like same day. Didn't get delayed. Didn't get stuck in goodness
Yeah.
knows where. Like, unfortunately, many other travelers did this holiday season. But
We talked about the picking the right routing, and at the time when we were looking at flying, it was like, oh, we should just get on the direct to San Diego.
mhm,
And in hindsight now, it's like, thank goodness we didn't, because I would put money on it, guaranteed that
that
flight
one
was
would have been
canceled.
dropped. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Or had we made it, we probably would have stopped in LA on the way back anyway.
Because of the leak that was happening in the pipeline for fuel, right? So
Yeah, which we covered in our last experience, which, as we've just found out, it has been fixed.
yeah, and I remember this was like 2011, I think it was, that I flew from Toronto to San Diego and did some touring. And I remember the U.S. Security saying like, "So why aren't you flying to LAX?" And I'm just like, well, I mean, do I
Yeah,
have to tell you?
exactly. San Diego Airport is wonderful. It's a very
It's a
nice.
wonderful airport, and what I remember doing for that was like I was like 2 hours early. I'm like, well, I can just take the bus all the way to the pier, go sit on the pier for a while, and then just take the bus back and then check in.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's great plane spotting. Like
Yeah,
it's a
it's
nice
it's
little
a
airport.
wonderful airport. Yeah, but
Yeah,
yeah, LAX. Yeah,
yeah,
and the one time I remember driving from LAX to Santa Monica at rush hour and ending up on residential streets because they were faster than the freeway.
yeah, yeah, yeah. That happens. Yeah. So there we go. Wild and crazy times, but let's hope that 2023 brings us smooth travels. Yeah, and here we are with.
Exactly, and people, figure out how to, max get workforce or whatever to be able to handle it, and do so with keeps prices that are comfortable for people as well.
Exactly. Speaking of prices and something that may save some change, let's go into the news. And I think you have a interesting bit.
I do. So just let me track this down here. And so essentially, Wi-Fi on board. Of course, I mean, pretty much everybody you fly with, it's like, okay, pull out your credit card and pay for it if you want to use it. So this is from Travel Weekly. And so Delta will spend more than $1 billion for free Wi-Fi and a whole bunch more. So they were at the CES Consumer Electronics Show in Las Vegas, and quality Wi-Fi in the air, free to all, was the quote last frontier of connectivity. And quote Delta CEO Ed Bastian told standing room crowd during his keynote. And so what they're doing is now they're linking it, of course. The Wi-Fi, you have to be a member of Delta Sky Miles, but that'll just be set up on the seat back screen. Then they're also going to convert all of its current screens, 150,000 of them, to touch responsive screens. And then beyond that, Delta will be an umbrella brand. It's going to be a collection of digital services, engagement opportunities, and experiences. So they are partnering with other brands through a new Delta Sync entertainment platform. So there would be things, say, like Starbucks or Paramount Plus or American Express or Atlas Obscura, that are things they'll currently have. And eventually, it looks like Sync will eventually have retail, gaming, and sports. So sort of the Sky Mall for the 21st century by the looks of it.
Wow.
And so free Wi-Fi will be available beginning February the 1st for all planes that are capable, about 80% of the US system. And then they state every week that goes by, there will be more and more planes turned on. By the end of next year, so end of 2024, we'll have on all international planes and then on regional planes. And the Sync platform is expected to arrive in April.
Amazing. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, so
Huh.
I think that's that will definitely be
That's a game
a
changer.
competition point, and they're intending to have it available for every device that you have. Goodness knows what the
I don't know what the bandwidth's going to be like.
bandwidth or latency is going to be, but yeah, that
Again,
is incredible.
I mean, it's like joining Wi-Fi in a shopping mall, right? I mean,
Yeah,
you have connectivity, but don't rely to like do online gaming or something.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Sweet.
Or voice communication or recording a podcast in the air or something,
Yes,
right?
yes. One day. One day. There you go. Well, if you are not interested in Wi-Fi, then you can try and pull off something else. Well, maybe you shouldn't be pulling this off. So there's a incident that occurred, I think November 26th on an Air India flight. Just appalling. It's like this I think he was a business class passenger, a Wells Fargo executive. He got inebriated and then urinated on a 72-year-old female passenger in business class.
Yeah, when the cabin lights were turned off.
Yeah, like, oh, this is like below humanity. And Air India,
I mean, can you imagine, like, waking up on a flight and all of a sudden it's like, well, why am I waking up? And it's like, oh my gosh.
no, right? Exactly. And oh, this poor older lady, too. And Air
Yeah.
India got a lot of flack for this. I mean, we have a few articles here, but we can just talk about this in general. Because the only thing they did at first was just say, oh, you're banned from flying for 30 days from Air India.
Yeah.
Ooh. Like, what's up with that?
Yeah. So, I mean, it's exposing himself and urinating on himself, on the person, right? So,
Yeah, yeah. So now, I mean, we're on simple flying, and this is just from the last 2 days. He is being charged with public misconduct, being a drunken person, obscene act in a public place, outraging modesty, and more under the India Penal Code and Aircraft Rules Act 1937. Hefty fine and jail time if convicted, and so on and so forth. So, but still, as an airline, like the fact that you didn't kind of pursue that at first is
yeah.
pretty appalling, which, like I've stated in many podcast episodes before, I'm not a fan of Air India. So,
Yeah.
yeah,
But given, the new investment with Tata and partnerships with Singapore for other things, I mean, it should be a good airline and
should be,
hopefully
yeah. I mean, it's a
turning
flag
itself
carrier.
around. I mean,
We've
yeah.
seen some really nice airlines out of India in the past. I remember Jet Airways was really nice.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, who knows what this guy was thinking, and just I
Well, he was obviously taking advantage of all the free alcohol that was available in business class.
no kidding, brutal.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's something you don't do as a Seat 1A passenger.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean the CEO Campbell Wilson issued an apology, and then a more recent internal message to employees. Well, I mean, it's pretty blunt, but it's like the repulsion felt by the affected passenger is totally unacceptable, and we share her distress. Whilst the story is more complicated than has been reported, there are clearly some lessons we can and must learn. Most importantly is that if an incident on an aircraft involves improper behavior of such magnitude, we must report it to authorities at the earliest opportunity, even if we genuinely believe that the matter has been settled between the parties involved.
Yeah.
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 Yikes.
Oh,
Now, we've talked about drunken passengers and things. Nobody ever urinated in the aisles or anything on your flights, did they?
no, not on any flight that I worked. But it's shockingly a bit more common than one would like to think.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yikes.
right, onwards and upwards we go from there.
Absolutely. And no taking the piss out of anybody.
Wah wah.
All right. So, yeah, that wraps up the crazy insanity that was holiday travel in 2022. If you liked this podcast experience, be sure to rate us and subscribe. Tell your friends and fellow travelers about us. Make sure you visit us at podcast.seat1a.org for complete show notes. That's Sierra Echo Alpha Tango, the number 1, alpha.org. Feedback, addenda, letting us know where we've messed up. You can send all of that to stories, STORIES, at seat1a.org. If you'd like to support the show financially, we have a page at Patreon, patreon.com/seat1a. Links are included in the show notes.
And here's what you can look forward to in upcoming Seat 1A podcast experiences. We're going to take a look at traveling with senior citizens, airport hotel experiences. We have a few more interviews we're working on, and a refresher on ticketing. As always, we look forward to your stories and your comments. If there's anything you'd like us to talk about, please do let us know.
So until the next time, I'm Jeff. Thanks for listening.
And I'm Vinod. You're cleared for takeoff. Have a great flight.